Kelly Oubre is headed to the Indiana Pacers, a multi-year deal. They bolster their depth. They get a wing, a lot of stuff that they needed. A quick mini reaction pod coming right here on Locked On Pacers.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? It's Wednesday. It is July 1st, and the Pacers have struck their first move in free agency. I'm Tony East. This is Locked On Pacers. I cover the team for Forbes and Circle City Spin, and we have to talk about the Pacers' first move of free agency on the first full day of the proceedings. And that move is one that they were linked to yesterday that Ben Gibson and I talked about when we previewed the free agency position for small forwards. This was, to me, and as we discussed that day, the best possible realistic within the Pacers budget option at the 3, and it is who the Pacers will be signing with their first move in free agency. It's Kelly Oubre. This is going to be a very off-the-cuff podcast. I'm literally doing no notes. I'm not going to look at any other tabs. Then late tonight into tomorrow, we'll go much deeper into the fit and the role and what it means for the cap and the rest of free agency and things of that nature. But the reason this felt like such a good fit to me is for the Pacers' potential spending limits, right? They were about $10 million, a little less than that, below the first apron. So if they were going to use their non-tax mid-level, they needed to sign a player whose first-year salary was less than that. And trading away Cam Jones gave them just a little bit more wiggle room, which is crucial here because that allowed them to sign Kelly Oubre, who saw the reported list of his suitors. The Sixers signed Dean Wade and Ariel Hukporti with part of their mid-level. They still had Oubre's early bird rights. The Lakers signed a bunch of dudes. The Portland Trailblazers traded for John Morant, and they still could do some other stuff, but still. And that left the Pacers in a good position to give him a strong, fully guaranteed 2-year offer of nearly $17 million, a bit below that. So their position helped here. Their willingness to spend up to what they were able to in this exact moment really helped here. And Oubre's a good player. That is the key part of this, right? The Pacers' top 10 is all players they've had for multiple years, and that all of them, except for whoever their backup center projects to be, at least as of right now, are players that have produced in the postseason for them before. And, of course, Zubac hasn't for them, but has for the Clippers in the past. He's been on a conference finals run with LA before in the West. So their top players felt comfortable. The Chad Buchanan, their general managers, described the core 7, but they needed one more thing, I thought. You felt like after their top 10, their depth was just Quentin Jackson and Micah Potter, and that's like they're sometimes proven enough, but you really thought the Pacers needed one more dude. And Chad Buchanan last week said their depth was a superpower in their postseason runs, and that's true. And they could really have used an upgrade, I think, with their second unit, 2 or 3, depending on what position you feel like they need to have changed to feel the better rotation. And so that was the focus of so much of the offseason discussion. And Kelly Oubre is certainly that. To me, I don't think he'll be starting. I do not think he's better than Aaron Nesmith. You know who else doesn't think he's better than Aaron Nesmith? The salary cap. Aaron Nesmith got a 2-year extension starting at $19 million last year. This 2-year deal for Oubre starts at $8 million, right? So clearly the money talking says that Nesmith is more impactful. We've seen him fit. We've seen him play. So I think this is a lock. I probably won't spend any more time even discussing this, that Oubre will be a very good bench player for the Pacers, but will not be starting, but notably can, right? He has, I'm not saying he will like for the fully healthy Pacers, but he started almost over 80% of his games for the Sixers last year and almost all his games for them with his time there. He started for Charlotte for the last season he had there. He started in Phoenix, right? He has been a starter before, but has also, like he was that a little bit of that first year he had in Philadelphia, like he certainly was his first year in Charlotte, came off the bench a lot with the Wizards. So he's capable of that 6th man, 7th man, whatever role. It doesn't matter what man number he is. So he can come off the bench and give you that spark. And what matters here is, what did the Pacers lose? What was the big discussion as it pertained to what they lost from a skill perspective by trading away Mathurin? And I've always focused on, like, since their conference finals run, I would say Mathurin and McDermott, but really this slow drip of these like 2, 3, 4 types that they've lost over the last couple of years doesn't stop at those two. Mathurin obviously is one of them in the trade for Zubac, McDermott, but Buddy Hield, who they traded away for Doug McDermott. Bruce Brown, they sign and they trade him for Pascal Siakam. Jordan Nwora, they get in a trade. They trade him in the Siakam trade. Like, these players played in those roles, and some of them were better than others, but that's 5 out over the course of like 2.5 years. And all of a sudden they don't have like a huge lacking depth spot there, but that was clearly where they needed somebody the most. And getting good wings is hard. Kelly Oubre is all of 6'7", 6'8", whatever you want to say. Like, he has real size. His defense certainly can be hit or miss, but at that size, you can do something. He's not slow. He does have some athletic pop to him, right? A clear fit with his size and skill. But offensively, the big thing here is, Derek Kramer and I talked about this yesterday on a full podcast, the shooting has never really been a strength. He hit 36% last year, and that was a career high. I think a key part of how this will go is, can the Pacers shot doctor system and their ability to create just wide open looks for everybody, can they up that percentage for Oubre? Because the rest of his offense is very impressive. Over 50% on twos every year of his career since 2017-18. That's very good for a player of his size. And he generates a lot of his own shots. If you look at his shot profile, an overwhelming majority of his twos come from 10 feet and in. He's finished like 70% of his shots at the rim basically every year, basically since he joined the Warriors in 2020-21. His finishing from 0 to 3 feet, 69.7%, right? So that is basically 70%. That's a great number for a non-center to have, and he's doing it without having them be assisted. Of his twos in Philly, a little over 50% were assisted. His threes are assisted, but he can create his own looks inside the arc and get close enough to the basket to get himself an efficient look that he's making. Even if you have hesitancy about his defense, even if you have hesitancy about his jumper, all these things, his passing, his assists per game's never even reached over 2 ever, right? This is certainly not a perfect player. I'm not trying to dispute that. There's a reason he got $8 million. That skill at his size of just, I have the ball, I get there, I can shoot and make it, or I can cut because I'm really heady and athletic and can move, that will certainly boost the Pacers. Kelly Oubre will certainly help the Pacers in that way with a bench role. What are the immediate follow-up questions? We'll get to that in a second. But I think from a skill perspective, and I'll deep dive into this and watch way more of him and talk to people who've covered him in other places. But I mean, even I was blogging about him, about the Wizards back when he got drafted in 2015. This kind of player does make a ton of sense to me from a skill perspective of what the Pacers need. Who should he play over? How does this change the Pacers cap reality? What move could come next? Again, this is just off the cuff and looking at his basketball reference sheet. Well, let's talk about that really quick, because this is a mini pod after all. Coming up next year on Locked On Pacers. But first, everybody, let me talk to you guys about FanDuel. The biggest stage in world soccer is here later tonight, a fun one. Every match feels like it has the potential for a memorable moment. One goal can completely change the energy of a game, shift momentum, and alter the outcome in an instant. So it makes tournament soccer so exciting, from the opening whistle to the final kick. And right now, FanDuel is giving fans another reason to stay locked in to every match with every goal pays. Better to match, you get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. More goals means more bonus bets. All you have to do is turn on your token. We've all seen those games where it's scoreless for what feels like forever, and then one goal just flips everything immediately. Suddenly everybody's pressing and running around, and the crowd's alive, and there's tension, and the last 20 minutes is so exciting. It's must-watch television. Those are the matchups that are a blast. You can find those matchups where teams are aggressive offensively because the game can open up quickly. There's more chances. It's more exciting from beginning to end, and now you can benefit from each goal scored in that game or all games. From the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Back here on a bonus mini, Locked On Pacers. Thanks for tuning in and making me your first listen today and every single day. Check out Locked On Sixers next, because they signed players who are not the incumbent Kelly Oubre, as they have a new front office. I also think that is of note. The front office that signed Kelly Oubre and would have held his rights is gone. They have Mike Gansey now. Daryl Morey is elsewhere, and Mike Gansey goes and gets one of his old players from Cleveland and goes and snags up somebody from the Knicks and lets one of his own guys walk out the door. Fascinating part of this. I'll say this now to get ahead of it. Everybody's going to go, oh, well, is this final? Are they hard kept for sure? I guess it's possible that this could fold into something bigger, but I don't expect it to, and I'm not going to get into why that is the case, and I don't really care to answer a ton of questions about it, but just for now, assume that either it's a sign and trade for nothing, and then just the Sixers get a trade exception, or the Pacers will just be signing him with the non-tax pyramid level exception. Both of those paths hard cap the Pacers at the first apron. A guarantee that unless they're finding a way to salary match in a trade, that this is going to hard cap them at the first apron. And so that's tricky for them now. This is another thing that I have to read the numbers on to be specific, but they are now, depending on what his first year salary is, I've heard about what it is, but not exactly what it is. The Pacers are about 1.6, 1.7 million away from that first luxury tax apron, or from the first apron. That's not what it's called. And so that is literally too small to sign a 15th player. The only player they in the world could sign is Braden Smith, because he is a 0 years of service minimum, and that is smaller than the distance between them and the first apron. Anyone else, literally anyone, they can't do, right? So right now they have 14 players. That's fine. 14 is an allowable number to carry into the regular season and to have during the season. Everybody, if you can, should prefer to have 15. You have more depth. You have more resources. You just never know how that's going to go. But if the only way to sign Kelly Oubre is to not use the 15th spot, then I suppose that's a trade-off the Pacers will have to live with. But now we see, and I'll get to this in more detail in future episodes, but do they need to trade away somebody making more than the minimum so they can sign two players? Do they need to trade players in other ways? Who knows? There's a lot of kind of fascinating machinations to this. But right now, the Pacers, this is their 14, unless they do other things. Even if they do that little thing I talked about with waiving Potter to bring him back on a cheaper deal, whatever. So they can still add other players, but they'd have to make a move first to do so. If they want to sign someone else completely, a completely different free agent, they'd have to either waive Micah Potter or waive Quentin Jackson or trade away somebody's salary completely. That's the next thing to keep an eye on. I'm making no suggestions at the moment. I'll dig more into this tonight and try to get some specific numbers for predictions, but that is of note that this takes up a lot of their spending power. Now, if this is what they believe the best player they could have gotten, who cares? Use your spending power on the best player you can get. But that is, to me, the immediate first cap reaction is they have 14 players that fits under the first apron. They're hard capped. And notably, for fans, they don't have, until they finish the season, this is not a thing, but they are currently over the tax and have a tax payment of, I can't quite get this right. This is my first year doing like hardcore tax calculations. But they're over the tax and would have somewhere between a $6 and $7 million tax bill going out the door, depending on how far over they actually end up, depending on the first year value of his deal. But that is, again, let me get those numbers finalized for tomorrow's show. This is off the cuff. Just type the number into Excel and call it a day. So the other question is, where does this put the rotation, right? TJ McConnell's playing for the second unit. Obi Toppin's going to be a second unit player. Someone will be the backup five, Jay Huff, Micah Potter, anonymous player, XYZ, whatever. And then Oubre's playing, right? He'll be one of the guys. So that's 4. That's a top 9. And then who's the 10th, right? Naturally, Oubre, you'd think of his skills, he could play the 2. His size means he could play the 3. Is Ben Shepherd getting kicked out of the rotation? Is Jarris Walker getting kicked out of the rotation? Is it someone else? I highly doubt it would be anybody else, quite frankly. In fact, there's almost no case for anybody else for the Pacers' current iteration of their team, unless they're playing Oubre Toppin as their 4-5 off the bench, which I don't know if that's something they want to do. The league's getting huge. There's been a lot of center moves recently, but that's, I guess, inbounds. So to me, this squarely points now at Ben Shepherd and Jarris Walker and what the Pacers now want, right? I think everybody would think that Walker has the more upside of those players. He's also the most expensive and has been the most inconsistent, whereas Shepherd has been, despite his awful start to last season, his month was terrible. He was pretty consistent for the last 3 months of the season and has been in the rotation in the postseason more often. I amazingly would call him the more consistent of those two players and requires very few touches. But that's it. That there's not a right answer to that question right now to me. I think the fit with Oubre might actually matter as it pertains to which of those guys should play. I presume everybody's going to assume that if the Pacers make no moves, Walker would be the guy that gets the spot. And I think that's a reasonable prediction to make. He also makes more money, and they could trade him to get out of the tax. I'm not saying they should do that, but also if they trade him, I forgot to include this in the cap part. If they trade him, they would get under the tax, but they would be so close to the tax that signing a 14th player would take them right back over. So they don't actually get a lot of benefit out of that right now. So still a lot to sort through for the Pacers rotationally and salary cap wise. I'll go into more detail on that as they, maybe figure out if they should add a 15th player. Do they want someone else? What would that even be? What player would that even be? Who knows? But for now, Kelly Oubre is headed to Indiana, about the best possible type and quality of player they could get with the resources available to them, and they get it done. And it's major that they were able to move off Cam Jones because that actually made this affordable and inbounds for them. So much longer podcast coming later tonight when perhaps more details flood in or more free agency happens. We'll talk about other moves that happen, things of that nature. Thank you all so much for listening to the quick one. We'll see you later tonight, tomorrow, whatever. See you very soon.